The sound of the mailbox bell, sharp and unexpected, rang out in the morning silence, shattering it into small pieces like fragile glass. Normally, this sound signified the start of a new day, with its routine and usual concerns. But today, under the pale April sunlight, it rang like an ominous warning, like a funeral bell for something dear and irretrievably lost. I, Oliver, an architect by calling and, until that fatal moment, a happy man by definition, pulled myself away from my morning coffee and walked to the mailbox, sitting on the brick posts of the porch of our cozy home. The usual morning chill burned my skin, but I paid no attention, absorbed in a sense of foreboding. Inside, amidst the colorful array of flyers and bills, stood a single envelope, distinguished by its sterile whiteness. It had no markings, no return address, like a ghost materialized from nowhere. My heart unexpectedly tightened, beating faster, like a frightened bird in a cage. Even before my fingers opened the envelope and pulled out the single sheet of paper, I already felt the cold breath of anxiety on the back of my neck. The subject of the letter, printed on the paper in simple, soulless black text, screamed an alarm like an air raid siren. Betrayal! Just one word, but how much poison, how much destructive power it held. The text below, short, concise, cruel, like a punch to the stomach, took my breath away. Your wife Ashley is cheating on you. Check her business trip on April 10th. Ask about Ben from the office. The words jumped before my eyes, almost as if they were dancing a sinister dance of death. It felt as though the air around me thickened, becoming heavy and sticky like a nightmare seeping into reality. Blood drained from my face, leaving my skin cold and damp with sudden sweat. My hands trembled so violently that the thin paper rustled like dry autumn leaves torn from branches by a cold wind. I read those cursed lines over and over, almost hypnotized, hoping this was some absurd, inappropriate joke, a cruel mistake, someone's twisted prank, senseless and baseless. But the cold, merciless truth seeped into every cell of my body, poisoning the familiar, painfully familiar world, turning it into something alien and hostile. Ashley. My Ashley? Cheating. No, this was some wild, absurd mistake. This was impossible. We were happy, weren't we? 6 years, like one moment, had passed, like a bird in the sky. Shared trips, filled with laughter until our stomachs ached, quiet evenings spent in warm embraces on the couch, under blankets, dreams of the future, plans we built together, brick by brick, with love and hope, like that spacious, bright house I designed for us, embodying all our shared desires. We had just celebrated our anniversary, laughing, recalling our silly first meeting, planning a romantic vacation on a sunny coast, discussing how to turn the neglected garden behind the house into a blooming paradise. Trust. It was the unshakable, solid, rock-like foundation of our marriage, or so I always sincerely believed. I always thought our relationship was something special, exceptional, strong, real, withstood the test of time and hardship. Could I have been so terribly wrong? Was it all just an illusion, beautiful but empty wrapping hiding a bitter, poisonous truth? Suddenly, the comfort of our home, which I had valued so much, which I had loved so dearly, began to crush me unbearably, as if the walls were closing in, shrinking the space, taking away the air. The light, freshly painted walls of the living room, where we had so often spent warm evenings talking about everything in the world, now seemed cold and distant, like the walls of a tomb. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, which usually energized me in the morning, filling me with optimism and energy, now tasted bitter and unbearably anxious, like poison mixed in my favorite drink. Even the bright sunlight, which carelessly filtered through the large windows, spilling golden patches across the room, seemed dim and unfriendly, like a fake glow incapable of dispelling the gloom that was thickening in my soul. Everything that had once been so familiar and comforting suddenly lost its appeal, took on a sinister hue, filling with suspicion, deception, and crushing uncertainty. The usual soothing sounds of the house, the monotonous ticking of the old clock on the wall, the quiet, almost imperceptible hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, suddenly became unbearably irritating, reminding me of the relentless passage of time, which was pulling me away from the certainty of my own happiness, drowning me in a sea of doubts and fear. I, Oliver, a rational man to the core, an architect used to clear lines and well-measured proportions, had always trusted unshakable facts, cold logic, and careful analysis. Emotions, of course, are important, but facts are the only unmovable foundation on which solid structures can be built, I always believed. But now, in my head, instead of clear plans and logical conclusions, a chaotic storm of doubt, fear, and confusion raged. I am prone to analysis, it's true. I'm used to laying things out, looking for cause and effect relationships, but deep within my seemingly rational soul, there was a vulnerable heart, emotionally exposed and defenseless against the blow of fate. And this vile anonymous letter, almost as if on purpose, struck at the very heart of my vulnerability, shattering it into small, sharp pieces. Ashley. She had always been a little different from me. Energetic, ambitious, driven, successful in her career as a marketer, always on the move, always the center of attention. Always a little mysterious, elusive, with a spark of independence in her clear eyes that irresistibly attracted me, captured me, enchanted me. But mystery can be different, can't it? Could I have been so naive not to notice something important, something key, hiding behind that alluring mystery? Could I have been so blind in my boundless trust that I didn't see the dark spots on the sun of what I had believed to be our cloudless happiness? The seed of poisonous doubt, insidiously planted by this cursed letter, began to grow rapidly in my bewildered mind, sending deep roots, poisoning everything around, painting the world in dark, unsettling colors. And the most terrifying, paralyzing feeling was that I had absolutely no idea how to proceed, where to move, what to hold on to in order not to drown in this sea of suspicion and fear. Ignore this dreadful letter, pretending nothing had happened? Ask Ashley directly, laying my doubts before her, risking destroying the fragile trust that still smoldered in my soul? Or start my own secret investigation, turning into a spy in my own home, in my own life? Uncertainty gnawed at me from within, like a hungry rat, not giving me peace day or night. The day, which promised to be an ordinary routine workday, immediately and irreversibly turned into the start of an unbearable nightmare, from which I seemed unable to wake up. Ashley's voice, quiet and muffled, seeped through the bathroom door like poisonous smoke. I froze in the hallway, as if caught in a trap, listening to every word, every whisper. She was on the phone, and it wasn't an ordinary work call. There was tension in her voice, a kind of nervous urgency that made my heart skip a beat, racing with anxious rhythm. Fragments of sentences drifted toward me through the closed door. Yes, everything is confirmed. The 10th. No, don't worry, it's all under control. We'll meet there. Until evening, kisses. The 10th. My heart clenched painfully again, like a vice. April 10th. The date from the anonymous letter that had poisoned my morning now came to life in her quiet words, filling my suspicion with specificity, with a sinister reality. At dinner, an oppressive silence hung in the air, like thin ice ready to crack under the slightest careless move. I tried to act casual, cracking jokes, asking about her day, but every word felt forced, as if I were playing a learned role in a bad play. When the right moment came, I cautiously, like touching a raw nerve, asked about her business trip. "How's your work project? When do you leave?" I said, trying to make my voice sound indifferent, but feeling everything tighten inside me as I awaited her response. Ashley confirmed the trip with a nod, but her gaze slid away, avoiding mine. "Yes, it's still on. I leave on the 10th, she replied, trying to sound calm, but I noticed a faint tremor in her voice, as if she was hiding something important. I tried to probe for details. Where exactly, for how many days, who she was going with. But with every question, she avoided specifics, citing confidentiality of the project. "You know, Oliver, I can't disclose the details. It's a trade secret," she said with a strained smile that didn't reach her eyes, leaving them cold and distant. Her evasiveness, lack of eye contact, the nervousness spilling out in tiny gestures, all of it only fueled my suspicions, turning them into an almost unbearable certainty of the worst. After dinner, when Ashley went to the bathroom, I was left alone with my thoughts, which buzzed in my mind like a disturbed beehive. As I began observing Ashley more closely, I started noticing other details in her behavior that had previously been completely unnoticed, which now, under the light of suspicion, took on a sinister meaning. She began taking showers immediately after returning from work, whereas before she always did it in the morning before heading to the office. A change in habit, a small thing, but it stuck in my memory like a sharp hook. Another detail, when she came home, she always took her handbag upstairs, to the bedroom, whereas before, she would simply drop it in the living room or the kitchen. Why? What is she hiding in her handbag? Is that where she keeps evidence of her betrayal, letters, gifts, traces of another life hidden from me? Paranoia, cold and sticky, started to weave around my mind, turning ordinary things into threatening signs, confirmations of my worst fears. The internal conflict was tearing me apart. On one hand, I desperately wanted to believe in Ashley, trust her, dismiss these absurd suspicions like a bad nightmare that vanishes with the sunrise. I tried to convince myself that it was all a coincidence, a series of accidents, that the anonymous letter was just a dirty joke, nothing more. But the anxiety, like poison, had already entered my blood, not letting go, poisoning every day, every thought. On the other hand, the growing suspicions, reinforced by her evasiveness, behavioral changes, quiet phone conversations, would not give me peace, pushing me toward action, toward uncovering the truth, no matter how bitter it might turn out to be. I found myself at a crossroads, torn between wanting to trust my loved one and the unbearable need to know the truth, even if it destroyed everything I held dear. And deep down, I already knew I wouldn't be able to stop. I wouldn't be able to just close my eyes to the suspicions that were poisoning my life. The intrigue was pulling me deeper, the tension mounting with every passing minute, and I understood that the next step was inevitable. The decision that I needed irrefutable proof came to me suddenly, like lightning that tore through the thick darkness of doubt. I could no longer live in this uncertainty, poisoning myself with guesses and suspicions. I needed the truth, no matter how horrible it might turn out to be. And for that, as I understood, I needed evidence, solid, undeniable evidence that would leave no room for doubt. The first step on this path to painful truth was a visit to the lawyer. The office greeted me with cold elegance, a polished dark wood desk, leather chairs, walls adorned with diplomas and certificates in strict frames. The lawyer, a tall man with piercing eyes and the manner of a professional predator, listened to my jumbled account of the anonymous letter, my suspicions, Ashley's behavioral changes, maintaining an unreadable expression. His advice was dry and ruthless, like a verdict handed down without emotion or sympathy. If you want a divorce, Mr. Oliverson, you'll need evidence. The court doesn't accept emotions and guesses. Facts, only facts, he said, looking at me condescendingly, as though I were a patient being given a grim diagnosis. The lawyer's words, though cold, sounded like a sobering shower, bringing me back to harsh reality. The humiliation of realizing that I needed to gather evidence against my own wife mixed with despair and a sense of helplessness. But, as I understood, there was no other way. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt drained, yet at the same time filled with determination. Evidence. I would get it. The online store greeted me with the anonymity and indifference of e-commerce. A search for voice recorder pen returned countless options: spy gadgets, hidden cameras, tracking devices. I chose a discreet pen with a built-in recorder, elegant, black, looking completely ordinary, yet capable of capturing the whispered betrayals of secret meetings. As I bought the device, I felt filthy, guilty, like a criminal preparing a trap for someone close. Shame and guilt burned inside me, but determination prevailed. The need to know the truth, whatever it was, justified, in my eyes, any means necessary. The morning of April 10th greeted me with a gray sky and a cold, piercing wind. The day of Ashley's business trip had arrived. At breakfast, there was a tense silence, broken only by the clink of forks against plates. Ashley was silent and tense, avoiding my gaze as if afraid I might read the truth in her eyes. As she was preparing to leave for work, I, trying to hide the trembling of my hands, discreetly placed the recorder pen into her handbag, between her cosmetics case and notebook. The feeling was repulsive, rummaging through my wife's personal things, becoming a spy in my own home. But I had already crossed the line. There was no turning back. After work, under the pretext of meeting an old friend, I got into my car, parked near Ashley's office, and began to wait. Time dragged on unbearably slowly. Every minute seemed like an eternity. Finally, the office building doors opened, and Ashley stepped out. My heart raced wildly. I started the engine and began to slowly follow her car, keeping my distance, trying not to attract attention. The city streets blurred past the windows, indistinct and fuzzy, like scenery in a bad movie. Rain began to drizzle, smearing the glass with droplets, adding to the already tense atmosphere. Suddenly, Ashley turned off the main road and drove toward the outskirts of the city, where, as I knew, cheap motels and industrial zones were located. My heart skipped a beat. Where was she going? Could it be? The Highway Lodge Motel, with a flickering sign half dark, greeted us with the unfriendly look of a cheap dive. Ashley parked her car in the lot and got out. I stopped nearby, hidden behind trees, watching her like a predator stalking its prey. She approached the door of one of the rooms, glanced around nervously, and knocked. The door opened, and a man appeared on the threshold. An unfamiliar man. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a dark coat. They embraced, and in that moment, like in slow motion, I saw him lean in and kiss Ashley. The kiss was long, passionate, as if they hadn't seen each other in an eternity. Then together they entered the room, and the door closed behind them, cutting me off from any remaining hope, leaving me alone with the terrible truth. A coldness spread through my chest, paralyzing my will, taking away my ability to breathe. I saw what I had feared most, what I had refused to believe until the very last moment, proof of the betrayal, cruel and merciless, like a knife in the back. And this was just the beginning of the end. Empty. That's what I felt when I returned home from that damned motel. Not anger, not rage, not despair. At first, there was only an all-consuming, paralyzing emptiness, as if all the air had been sucked out of me, leaving only a formless shell. The house greeted me with a dead silence, as if it too mourned the shattered happiness. I mechanically made my way to the kitchen, pulled a piece of paper and a pen from the drawer. My hand trembled as I wrote the brief, ruthless words. I know everything. I'm at the Oasis Hotel, room 302. The crumpled note was like a sentence, handed down by my own life. The emotional subtext, pain, disappointment, emptiness, was hidden behind every careless stroke. Leaving the note on the kitchen table, like a gravestone on the grave of our marriage, I walked out of the house without looking back. I needed to escape, to hide, to disappear, if only for a while, from this place soaked in falseness and deception. The Oasis Hotel turned out to be a typical example of cheap hotel architecture. Faceless, unremarkable, with the smell of must and cheap laundry detergent in the hallways. Room 302 was the same. Standard furniture, dim lighting, a view of a blank wall from the neighboring building. A temporary shelter for broken hearts and lost souls. Loneliness enveloped me like a thick fog, seeping into every cell of my body. The night passed in sleeplessness, in the endless rehashing of events from the past days, in memories of happy moments that now seemed distant and unreal, like scenes from an old movie. Thoughts swarmed in my head, offering no peace, jumping from one to another like frightened rabbits. I recalled our trips, our laughter, the evenings together, trying to find some crack in the facade of our happiness that I hadn't noticed before. Thoughts of the future terrified me with their uncertainty, emptiness, the absence of any perspective. The feeling of emptiness inside only grew stronger, like a black hole swallowing all my emotions, all my hopes. The morning arrived gray and overcast, like a reflection of my inner state. Gathering the remnants of my strength and will, I took the voice recorder pen out of my pocket, the one I had slipped into Ashley's purse yesterday. My heart pounded like before jumping into the abyss. I turned on the recording and placed the headphones to my ears. The first few minutes, silence, only the faint rustle of fabric, street sounds drifting through the motel window. And then, her voice. Soft, excited, filled with hidden passion. And a man's voice, unfamiliar, foreign, weaving itself into her words, creating an intimate symphony of betrayal. Whispers, laughter, fragments of phrases, tender sighs, intimate sounds that sliced through the silence of my hotel room like sharp knives. Cheap music from the motel radio played faintly in the background, creating a dissonance between the vulgar banality of the surrounding world and the intimate drama unfolding in the recording. Disgust, pain, disappointment, anger, this hellish cocktail of emotions overwhelmed me, nearly knocking me unconscious. The recording was undeniable proof of the betrayal, the final destruction of my world, turning my life into ruins. I don't know how much time passed before there was a knock on the room door. I tore myself away from the headphones, as if from an intrusive nightmare, and silently opened the door. Ashley stood on the threshold, pale, confused, with red, tear-streaked eyes. She quietly entered the room without looking up. I handed her the headphones without saying a word. She took them with trembling hands and brought them to her ears. Watching her face, I saw how each second of listening to the recording reflected a new wave of pain and despair. Color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin deathly pale, her eyes filled with tears, her lips tightly pressed together. When the recording ended, she removed the headphones, looking at me blankly, like a lost child. "Who was that?" I asked quietly, but my voice carried steel, resolve, readiness for the worst. "And what does it all mean?" In response, instead of the expected excuses, lies or tears, Ashley blurted out the incredible, absurd, cynical. "It was Ben. Ben from the office. It was an experiment, Oliver. Yes, an experiment. We wanted to test if we could have an affair, and you wouldn't suspect a thing. It was a game." Ashley's words about the experiment sounded like a mad joke, like a cynical, mocking justification for the betrayal that not only didn't lessen the pain but, on the contrary, multiplied it 100-fold, adding to it a burning anger, contempt, and absolute incomprehension of what was happening. A game. An experiment. Does she really think I'll believe this nonsense? What happens next? Experiment. The word Ashley spoke hit me like a slap, as if she had spat in my face, devaluing everything between us, turning our relationship into a cynical game, a cold scientific experiment. A broken heart, that's too banal, too soft, to describe the pain that tore me apart from the inside. I felt not just betrayed as a man, but as an object, a thing whose feelings, whose trust were used, trampled, and devalued for some absurd experiment. The cynicism in her explanation was worse than the betrayal itself, for it revealed the depth of her moral decay, the chasm that had opened between us, a chasm that could never be crossed. Ashley's attempts to justify herself, which started immediately after her shocking confession, only heightened my disgust. Tears, pleas, promises to make it right, claims that the experiment got out of control, that she never meant to hurt me. All of it sounded fake, forced, like bad acting. She cried, grabbed my hands, tried to embrace me, but her touch only disgusted me. Did she feel any guilt at all? Did she understand the depth of what she had destroyed? I doubted it. Her apologies sounded like an attempt to absolve herself, to shift the blame onto Ben, onto circumstances, onto anything but acknowledging her own treachery and cynicism. Listening to her absurd excuses, I felt a cold, relentless determination building inside me. Forgive. Forget. Believe in this ridiculous experiment. No, it was impossible. The unbearable pain from the betrayal mixed with deep disappointment in the person I once loved, trusted, and had planned to spend my life with. I looked Ashley in the eyes, really looked for the first time in a long while, and saw not the woman I loved, but a stranger, unfamiliar, cold and calculating, capable of deceit, betrayal, and cynicism, all hidden behind a mask of care and love. Divorce, I said quietly but firmly, cutting off all avenues of retreat. One word, like a sentence, final and irreversible. Ashley's tears intensified, turning into full-blown hysteria. She begged, promised to change, to become a better wife, asking for one more chance, Another chance, the last chance. But I no longer listened. The words lost all meaning, the emotions had burned out, leaving only emptiness and cold. I knew that our relationship was destroyed forever, shattered not only by physical betrayal but by a deep moral abyss that had divided us, a chasm of cynicism, lies, and treason. The firmness of my decision even surprised me. There was no inner struggle anymore. There was only a clear, unshakable understanding that forgiveness was impossible, that returning to what had been was forever out of reach. Divorce became the inevitable, logical, and only possible conclusion to this story of betrayal and cynicism, firmly emphasizing the impossibility of continuing our life together. The final scene of the divorce was brief and formal, signing the official papers, exchanging cold glances, a silent farewell in the courthouse hallway. Then, an empty house, silence pressing on my ears, the absence of her things, her scent, her presence. Loneliness enveloped me like a shroud, but strangely, within that loneliness, there was also a sense of liberation. Liberation from deceit, from falseness, from the toxic relationship that had poisoned my life. Sadness, of course, remained, the bitter taste of lost happiness, broken hopes. But along with the sadness came a quiet hope for the future, for a new life, free from betrayal and cynicism, a life where trust and sincerity would matter again. The ending was bitter, but just. The story ended in divorce, but the period wasn't yet placed. Life continued, and ahead, I believed, something new, unknown, perhaps even better, awaited.